Welcome back to the Live Like Jesus podcast, where we strive to live like Jesus every single day so that we can do the things that Jesus did. It's going to be a great day today as we talk about renewing our minds. And as with us, as always, is Pastor John Louvier, Connections Pastor over at First Moss Bluff. And then with us this time is Ms. Lindsay back again.
Hello.
Yes.
Welcome back, Lindsay.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, thinking about this concept as I knew it was coming, just trying to, all right, what does this actually mean to me? Where do I see this? And so I had some questions, and so I wanted us to just get started, I think where everybody kind of is, and we'll start with you, Brian. Maybe you can bring some clarity to it as to what it actually is. Can you define it for us? And maybe tell us as our pastor, like, why is it so important? Why is it something that we really need to understand and know about?
Yeah, so we'll start there. So the Bible's clear, especially the Apostle Paul, he was clear about this, but I think by extension, Jesus, first of all, and then the Apostle Paul picking up on that and putting language to it. He's clear, Romans 12, renew your mind. Yeah. And then he talks in Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, set your mind not on things of the earth, but on things above. So he's constantly talking about how to renew your mind. And then you get over to 1 Peter where it's make your minds ready. Get your minds ready for action. And then by extension, you see, what did Jesus come to do? Jesus came to correct wrong ideas and understandings of who God was. So he came to basically renew people's minds. That's what he's doing in the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said this, but I say this. So you've thought this, right? But no, this is the way you need to think about things. And so from a biblical standpoint, I think you see it all over, starting with Jesus, all through the New Testament, the importance of what comes to our minds when we think about things. So the way to get into this, and hopefully this is helpful, is, we make meaning out of stuff. We're always like, what does this mean? Yeah. We've all asked that question before. Sure. What does this mean? So we take, information out of the world, but we're always interpreting it of like, what does this mean? Where do I catalog this and what I know and understand? And so the way a lot of guys, people, and myself included, talk about this in the spiritual formation front is, when we talk about your mind, that's the collection of ideas and images and the way you view the world. Right. And that's what needs to be renewed. Uh-huh. So you've got certain ideas. So when you hear words like freedom, well, a lot of things come to mind, a lot of ideas. It's really hard to kind of pin it down. When you hear a word in Christianity like gospel or salvation, redemption, a lot of images come to mind, ideas come to mind. And then closely related to that are the images that go with it. Like what does that look like in actual life? And so this is important because when you go all the way back to Genesis 3, when Satan tempted Eve, what did he do? He tempted her with false ideas. That's not what God meant. Here's what God meant. Yeah. And then he gave them a new image. Oh, the reason he's doing that is because you can be like him. Yeah. And he doesn't want that. He gave them a false image to grab hold of. And so the idea of renewing your mind is finding those false ideas that we call lies and false images, which are like a worldview, the way I view the world, and allowing the gospel to bring those down, to take every thought captive, as Paul says again in 2 Corinthians 10, take it all captive into the mind of Christ, to where I have the mind of Christ. Again, Philippians 2, I have the mind of Christ. I think like Christ thought. Therefore, I can live like Jesus lived.
I love how you're connected into like images that come to mind when certain words are said, because, we've all heard like this, the concept of the mind's eye. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the mind's eye tends to be almost like a silent voice. Mm-hmm. If you know what I mean, like you're sitting there and you may not be saying things out loud, but that mind is going and you're seeing these images in your mind. And
it's very intuitive. Like most of the time, we're not even aware of this. Yeah. We're not even aware of this. And so when we talk about Jesus says, take up your cross, and we, of course, it's very important, death to self, so that I can live to Christ, come alive to Christ. A lot of times we don't even know what we need to put to death because we're really not aware of what are the ideas and the images that are really driving my life. Because we just live by intuition on these things that are below the surface.
Yeah, and one of the things you brought up was the contrast that Jesus used to do, that does in Scripture, where you've heard it said this way, but I say it this way. You've heard it, and I've always I've heard you say it, I've heard other guys say it, pay attention to those.
Yeah.
When he starts to contrast things. Well, here in like Romans 12, we see Paul doing this contrast. And so I want to go to you, Lindsay, and kind of ask you, when you think about the contrast of the patterns of the world, instead renew your mind on the patterns of Christ. From your perspective, why is it so hard for us to resist the patterns of the world?
Well, this is just the way that I perceive it, and how I think on it, is that, we're all born spiritually dead.
Yeah.
And so as default, I feel like I gravitate on my default towards my flesh, and it takes a lot of self-awareness and self-reflection to be able to consciously be aware of that.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that I learned how to do that until I received the Spirit and I started activating that more in my life.
Right. What did you do to activate that a little bit more?
Again, I think self-awareness for me was key, because things happen and I would blame it on what happened and not necessarily what was going within me and within my thoughts and what triggered things the way that they triggered. And I just thought that this was a normal thing, and in a way it is, but there are specific things within me and within my mind that causes me to react and respond in a way that is more my flesh or that is more the spirit within me. And so me being aware and constantly trying to take inventory on how I'm responding, if it's more in my flesh or if it's more on the spirit. And I always want to be more on the spirit and nurture that,
I love that.
Go ahead.
I love that because it's so what you said there is to become aware of how I responded. That's what we often don't do. We don't examine, like, why did I feel that way? Why did I just say that? Why did I respond that way? It's an ancient practice, but we should examine why did we do the things we, and when I say examine, it's Psalm 139. Let the Lord search your heart and show you this is why you did these things.
Such an important thing to do.
So I love that.
Right.
She mentioned self-awareness a couple of times, and it's almost like mind renewal is directly tied to self-awareness. Like our only way of being aware, self-aware. And so sometimes we hear self-aware as you either have self-awareness or you don't. As a pastor, like, how can you help somebody maybe gain more self-awareness?
Well, it goes back to what I was just talking about. Is I think, at the end of here's what, just a real practical thing I would encourage people to do, or tangible thing encourage people to do, is at the end of your day, take some time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour, however long you want to take, and really think through your day, your actions, the words that you spoke, the reactions that you had. Think those through. And, we talked about journaling here, and you need to journal those out. And as a journaling, it's not just you're writing it on paper. It's good to write on paper. Paper's safe, papers, you can't hurt anybody writing it on paper.
That's right.
So as you're doing that process, and it, also staying sensitive to the Holy Spirit of like, okay, so I got angry here. I reacted in anger towards this situation. And then being bold enough to become aware enough to say, what is in me that caused me to react with anger?
Gotcha.
Because oftentimes, just like Lindsay very astutely pointed out, we often want to say, well, it's because of what you did.
That's right.
No, it's not. You didn't make me do anything. We say that all the time. Oh, they made me so angry.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I didn't hand you the leash to my life. If I did, I need to take it back.
Right.
Living like Jesus can seem impossible at times. So we've created a free guide for you. Just go to the link in the description and you'll get a free guide to help you take your next steps in living like Jesus. Also, while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe.
So, but it's something inside of me that what you did gave that an opportunity to come forward. That's why I say sometimes our reactions, if we will take the moment to process them and examine them with the Holy Spirit, it's a sign of it's God's grace, because now we're beginning to see, man, these are places where God still needs to work on me and redeem me. And you become all of a sudden pay attention. This like a situation like I got angry last time.
Yeah.
This time I sensed I was getting angry. I know what it felt like. My jaw clenched, my fist tightened, and I was able to say, Spirit, give me patience, or something along those lines.
Right. Yeah, I think it takes so much humility to be able to do that. because you have to admit that you may be the problem. Like
maybe it's like G.K. Chesterton. Somebody wrote him a letter, "Dear sir, what's wrong with the world?" He replied with 2 words back: "Dear sirs, I am." Send it back.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow,
That's the truth.
Brilliant.
That really is the truth. And so I think that gives us a clear understanding of what it is and also why it's important for us to care about it, right? But I think we should get a little bit further into some more specifics on how it can transform maybe some specific areas of our lives. And so, Lindsay, I want to come back to you. As adults, we're all adulting, right? And
I don't want
as
to
the kids say. And we have a lot of decisions to make. Some of them are, easy, simple decisions, but a lot of them seem to be like big decisions that affect lives, not just our lives, but our families' lives and coworkers and different things like that. How does a renewed mind in this concept help you approach some of those decisions with more clarity and wisdom as you go into them?
Oh goodness. There is such a dive that we can go on, but last year in our senior small group that we had on Sundays, one of the girls brought up this verse, and it's something that I revert back to whenever it comes to having clarity and having resolve and peace. And I think it's Isaiah 41:3. And it says that I'm the Lord your God who holds your right hand and who guides you. And so like for me, whenever I'm adulting, because I don't like to all the time, and I'm not saying that I don't struggle still with decisions, because I definitely still do, but always though it's there, that's like a foundation that's holding up everything, is that as long as I'm doing it with him, then I know that no matter what, I can have peace about whatever I'm deciding on, because everything that I do, every choice is made with me following him and me asking for his guidance.
Sure.
And so for me, that was a huge change or a huge switch that went off for me whenever I realized, or whenever I came across that through scripture, because it's such a simple concept, because we know he's there, but actually living with that peace is hard to do sometimes.
It is, right.
But it's still so true. It doesn't change.
It doesn't change how true it is. Yeah.
Because so no matter what happens, if I make a bad choice, doesn't go the way that I want to, I'm still doing it with him, and he still has me. He's still God. He's still the same person that he is. And so it's okay. It's okay.
That's another one of those contrasts that comes to my mind, is that the enemy and the culture and the world wants to make our minds cloudy and even a little muddy at times, where the decisions just don't seem to flow right. But Jesus wants to give us a clear mind.
Yes.
He wants to give us clarity. He's not the author of confusion. And so even though sometimes we may have some doubts, we may have some, I wonder about this, but we can trust him and we can know that that's there. And so decision-making covers a lot of life, but I think there's another part of life, Brian, where like relationships affect a huge portion of our lives. How does having a renewed mind affect the way you deal with relationships, whether they be at home with your spouse or your children, or even at work with coworkers like me?
Yeah.
A lot of prayer.
A lot of prayer.
A lot of prayer.
So I think when it comes to relationships, again, I don't know if you can get away from self-awareness enough there.
Yeah.
It still comes back to that in some regards. But once you start to try to get a little bit aware of, this is how I react and respond in these typical situations, and I want to renew that. So it's a renewed, you got to begin to see yourself differently. And so this depends on the relationship. So often we move in our relationships, and this is intuitive. It depends on what our ideas of our identity and our images of how we see ourselves. But at some level, all of us have these self-protective modes, right?
Right.
You've seen them. I've done them.
Absolutely.
We've all done them, where it's like, I'm going to protect here. And with me, it's a protection of, if I feel like anyone's moving into an area where they're going to kind of make me feel like I might not know something, well, I get I get protective at that point, and it's not always good. So being aware of where are my self-protections. And again, that's
important.
That's self-awareness. Where do I tend to protect? Because when that gets attacked, that's when you tend to like, your ideas and images come forth and it's like, okay, I've been attacked. I'm either going to retreat or I'm going to fight best, fight or flight at that point.
And both of those break relationships.
Both of those break relationship because I'll withdraw. So basically, especially if it's a spouse, a loved one, I'm going to punish you by withdrawing relationship.
Right.
Or I'll take the opposite and I'm going to pound you into the ground. You know,
I'm going to defeat you.
Yeah. And most likely it's going to be with words.
Yeah. Right.
And some people are gifted with words to do that.
Lindsay, from a woman's perspective on relationships, how have you seen like having a clear mind help you with relationships in your life?
I think that the area it's helped me most is having a renewed mind has helped me not get offended as easily. And I think the way that we get on defense, especially in relationships, it usually is because we become offended or we feel like we've been attacked, and then that causes an offense and that causes us to respond however we're going to respond. And so just like Brian was saying, being aware of those like triggers that come in every relationship, friends, family, within marriage, especially within marriage. But it's helped me to realize how toxic being offended can be.
Yeah.
And it has caused me to instead of responding out of that offense, but to try to respond in a way that shows more understanding about what's going on, and that usually this person that I'm in a relationship with, they're on my team and they're my partner, and I don't want to lose the relationship. They don't want to lose the relationship with me. So for both of us not to get offended, it's helped me the most there.
How many have y'all ever used the phrase, I had a moment of clarity?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it normally comes after a moment of muddy.
Yes.
And the moment of muddy is where you do things like what we're talking about. You get offended, you break relationship, you do these different things. And as you were talking, it made me think of that. Like, I want moments of clarity before I blow something up.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like there's been plenty of times in my life where I get a moment of clarity later and you're like, why did I even think that? Amber's for me. Why did I think she was the enemy in that situation that needed to be defeated or whatever? Mine is normally just to defeat. I don't withdraw much.
New Iberia, baby. Here we come.
So, but that's the thing is like, I want those moments of clarity to be like the default, not the moments of muddy.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is for us to put some practical things in our life that does this for us. And I think that's where we should kind of end our episode today.
Well,
but you want to throw something in?
Yeah, I want to say, and I learned, Dallas Willard writes about this, and I think it's in the Spirit of the Disciplines. Yeah, I think that. I think that's where it is. But anyway, we'll figure it out. It's either Spirit of the Disciplines, Renovation of the Heart, or Divine Conspiracy. It's one of those three. So anyway.
Read them all.
Yes, do. That would be amazing. But he talks about, this is where he kind of draws it down. He goes, what would Jesus do? That wasn't a terrible thing, but it just kind of misses the point, because what you're talking about is the ability to have clarity on the spot.
Yeah.
This is what the whole point of live like Jesus is.
Yes.
Jesus was able to do the things that he was able to do as a person because of what he did privately.
Leading up.
And so this is why all of these 9 habits that we continue to talk about, they're foundational. That's how you renew your mind. I know we're going to talk about that more next time, but you can't do it on the spot. You've got to prepare your mind, renew your mind in the private, so that on the spot, in the public. And when I say public, it's any relationship conversation. It could be happening in your home with your spouse.
Yeah.
That's the spot where you got to be ready.
That's right. Yeah, and like you just said, we have to have some practical steps for like, what are we doing to lead us into that spot?
Yep.
And so next week, just as a little bit of a preview, we're going to get deep into that. But I want us to spend a little bit of time, because they have a week or 2 weeks until they're going to see that episode. Let's spend a little bit of time today talking about what are some practical steps that they could begin over the next couple of weeks. Our listeners can begin over the next couple of weeks to start this journey of renewing their mind and seeing that clarity be able to come into the spot. And so let's kind of get into that. Lindsay, what are some daily habits that you have found most helpful for you when it comes to renewing your mind?
Well, I mean, and this might be kind of jumping too far ahead, but I mean, definitely being in the Word, that has been.
We usually start there. Yeah, with every tip of advice, we usually start there. So you're doing good.
Well, I mean, honestly, the best way the Bible has been explained to me is that it's just one big love letter that God left us, you know, and it tells us everything we need to know. And I probably am going to get emotional about it, and I'm sorry, but it really is beautiful.
It's good. Take your time.
Sorry. So if you can, and I know it doesn't work for everybody, but if you can, even just spending 5 minutes or even just taking notice where your mind goes whenever you first wake up for the day. You know, I had a beautiful lady in our journey group that the first thought of her prayer, it was her closing prayer for her morning time. And she simply said, like, Lord, I just give you today. And so that no matter what came that day, she was going to give it to him. And, you know, and it was always after her reading her, whatever passage she was in for the day. And so just, this has been the most clarifying thing for me. So that's where I would say to start.
I love it.
Sorry.
No, that's good.
Sorry.
You're totally fine. I think it's one of those things that we always tend to start there. Like every time we've given advice on this podcast, it starts there, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah, of course.
Like it is the spring that everything else comes out of.
It does. And I mean, you can't ask for a better direction than the clarity this brings.
Yeah.
That's right.
I love that. I thank you for that too.
Yeah.
Brian, you have come across something new here recently. Why don't you share with us what that is, the James?
Oh, the James journal method.
Yeah.
So actually, let's save that for the next time.
Oh, you want to do that next time?
Yeah, because what
Sorry.
Lindsay said was amazing. And
Sorry.
We're not going to step on that at all.
I can't improve on that. That was wonderful.
If they heard it through the cracks.
That was a great last thing for
No,
everyone.
and honestly, so if you're someone who's struggling to buy in like that, that doesn't come. I'll say this, Lindsay, your love for the Word doesn't come like just overnight because you decided.
No, it's actually forced at me.
That's built.
Somebody forced me to start doing it, and thank God they did.
And it built up.
It did.
And it's to the point where it's emotional for you to even talk about what it means to you.
It is.
And I think that's a good reminder for all of us to do that. And so if you're not in the Word, or if you're just kind of on the edges of it, or you're not really doing, or you don't have someone, I would say look for someone to do it with you and figure out a way that you can be in the Word, because everything that we're going to talk about next episode is that the Bible's going to be the base of it.
Yep.
That's the truth of it. It should be. And so we're going to get there next episode. I do want to leave us as we close out this episode. We've been talking about a lot of things, and honestly, there's been some really good discussions that have kind of gone on. But I want us to get to a point, like, what is one practical takeaway that you'd encourage listeners to try, or like to try to implement this week? Is it something to do with the mind? Is it something to do with the Bible? Like, what would it be if you were just going to say, hey, I want to encourage you in this way this week? Brian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would just, like I said, I can't improve on what Lindsay said. I would say open the Word every day. So if you don't know where to start in 1 John or the Gospel of John.
Yeah.
Those are not the same thing.
They're not the same thing. They are different.
I found that out.
1 John's a little bit further.
Found that out as a young, fresh, new believer in Christ.
Same.
Those are not the same.
So I think didn't the guy tell you read 1 John and you read John?
I read the Gospel of John because that's the first John.
A little bit longer.
Yeah. So, but anyway.
But it worked out.
It did.
Yeah. How about you? How would you encourage somebody?
Well, along with reading the Word, but also if it's not something you already do practice, but to practice being self-aware, take inventory, what emotions come from what situations, and if it's something that causes a negative effect, dig a little bit deeper into that within yourself, not necessarily pointing it in other directions, but just within your, like, what caused you to respond that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way I'd encourage, kind of jumping off of what both of you have said, is also, as you're doing this, the enemy is going to try to get you to use these moments of self-reflection to punish yourself, to bring shame or guilt to your life. That's not from Jesus. No. Jesus does this to bring clarity, not to bring shame or guilt. So if you start feeling shame or guilt, you can actually know that isn't from the Lord.
No.
And you can speak against that. You can know that that's not from him. He wants to bring clarity to you. So this should be an uplifting experience, not one that makes you feel down about yourself.
Well, and conviction's a gift. You know, it really is, you know, because that's him letting you know, like, hey, there's more. You know,
that's right.
Look into it.
That's right. Well, thank you all so much for being here and for having this conversation. Like I said, in a couple weeks, for the next episode, we're going to dive really deep into the practical steps of how to make this a part of your life. But I want to thank you for joining us on the Live Like Jesus podcast. If you enjoyed this and you like the content, make sure you share it with your friends. Give us a like, give us a follow. Comment on it. We'd love to hear from you. But if nothing else, we'll see y'all next time on Live Like Jesus.
So living like Jesus isn't something that comes naturally to us. And so we all need help in doing that. So we created a free guide to help you out. Just click on the link in the description for you to take your next steps to live like Jesus.